Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Jiayuan and I'll be your MC for today. This session will be on digitally connecting dots in the new Silk Road, Renaissance of Innovation. During this panel discussion, our distinguished panel of innovators and business leaders shall bring together the perspectives of different roles which Asian players in field of education, startup, technology, and business. They will share their views of the social capital, culture, and structure makeup of China and recent case studies that have successfully connected the dots. It is now my pleasure to introduce our host for this panel, Kelvin Tan. Kelvin is the Program Director of NUS Enterprise. He leads the corporate partnership role and the business development in Smart System Institute. Kelvin, please.
Thank you. Thank you to the moderator and panelists of this session. We are honored that you could come for this closing panel of InnoFest Unbound 2018 in Futurenow stage. So in Futurenow stage, we are talking about the trends, we are talking about the deep tech stuff that's happening around the world. And probably it's very apt to talk about the digital connects and how in the new Silk Road that is very commonly called also the One Belt, One Road, how it's shaping this hot topic with geographical connections in ASEAN, some views from China, from Hong Kong, and Ken himself obviously is very familiar with India as well as Japan. We want to find out how a common objective of coexistences, which are the key ingredients for exchange of human capital, logistics, and technologies to be successful. It's a mouthful, but I'm sure we do have experts here to share with you and let you know how to be successful. This panel itself also consists of VCs, consultants, industry leaders, and they will have some case study to share with you. We are privileged to have the time of all these gentlemen and also a lady, Louise from Financial Times, James Ong from YCH, Adrian Lee from Gartner, Jiang Gan from Momentum Works. So I'm going to now introduce our key person, Ken. He's the moderator of this session. Ken has just landed in Mumbai yesterday, and he's going to fly off to Bangkok and then Tokyo after that, which I just came to know about. And we are so happy that he, as the editor-at-large in Nikkei Asian Review, is one of the most experienced journalists of online media as well as a developer, editor-at-large based in Mumbai, as I mentioned. He edits stories on business, economy, and politics across Asia. For the preceding 3 years, he was the founding publisher of Nikkei Asian Review, NAR, from its launch in November 2013 till April 2015. Before NAR's launch, he led the project to develop websites and apps for Japanese Nikkei newspapers' online edition. Since joining Nikkei in 1988, Ken, as a staff journalist, has covered various fields, including Tokyo capital markets, financial sector, technology, media, and telecom sector. He was the Silicon Valley Bureau Chief during 2003 to 2005. And so I'll now invite Ken to the stage and introduce the rest of the panelists. Thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you, Kelvin, for over-generous introduction of myself. I'm Ken Koyanagi with Nikkei Asian Review. Nice to meet you all. And thank you for staying till the final session of this great event. And I hope we can satisfy with your expectations. So let me introduce our panel. First, I'd like to invite onto the stage Mr. James Ong, partner of, do we pronounce this SC Angels or Supply Chain Angels? Supply Chain Angels was YCH Group. And next onto the stage, I'd like to invite Mr. Adrian Lee, Research Director, Personal Technologies Gartner Advisory, Singapore. Next, I'd like to invite my colleague, technology correspondent of Financial Times, Ms. Louise Lucas, please. And finally, but not least, I'd like to invite Mr. Jiangan Li, founder and CEO, Momentum Works. And he founded also Easy Taxi Singapore, and also he used to be managing director of Food Panda Singapore. Okay, first in this panel discussion, we'd like to invite each of the panelists to do a little mini keynote, maybe lasting for 3 minutes to 5 minutes, including self-introduction, who they are and what they're doing. First, I'd like to start with James.
Sure. So I'll just run through some of the slides that we have. If you could flash it. Yep. So next slide. So YCH, I double hat. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at YCH, but also look after the corporate venture. YCH, we've been around for now 60 over years. Basically, we are passenger transportation services. We have our own technology arm, which is called Y3 Technologies, which we build to warehouse management, inventory management, track and trace solutions. We also have another company called Ascentis, where we power customer relationship management solutions for the likes of Starbucks, Din Tai Fung, CK Tang, and Orchard. Next slide. YCH, next slide, thanks. Oh. We have about 5,000 people in over 100 countries, 16 countries, 100 cities, and roughly about 10 million square feet of real estate. If you're thinking about how big is 10 million square feet, so roughly 1 million square feet is equivalent to Vivo City size. So we have 10 Vivo cities equivalent of warehouse space where we test bed new ideas of innovation and technology. Later you'll see. This is our footprint across ASEAN. You see we're covered in most countries. We're Singapore headquartered, but we cover almost every single country in ASEAN. We just opened Myanmar and Cambodia last year. Just sample pictures of some of the warehouses where we own. Supply Chain City is the largest new development, 2 million square feet. We're in Malaysia and Penang, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam. We do quite a fair bit of warehousing for MNCs. In fact, we have a large fleet of trucks in Vietnam, where you see over there, close to 500 trucks going across Vietnam, distributing Aquafina water and desaline water. Xiamen, you see there, is actually an interesting concept. What we did is we have a warehouse, and we tore down the front part of the warehouse, converted it into retail. So basically, it's retail front and warehouse in the back. Some of our clients, MNCs, you see across there. Some may look familiar to you. Food Fair, Yao Yao, Fish & Co, Jollibee, Garrett's Popcorn. We do a lot for Dell across several countries, ExxonMobil, etc. This is our flagship property called Supply Chain City, where basically we test bid new ideas within the warehouse itself, from automation. And I'll show you a video very shortly. Some of the awards that we won, so I'll skip this. Innovation, I don't know whether we can play this. Let's see whether the back guys can help us play a video. Or do I click the clicker? Oh, we'll skip the video. But basically, we have innovation, which we have automated steroid retrieval system. And basically that has 66,000 pallets of automation. Not a single person manages this warehouse. It's entirely automated. In addition, we also have drones flying in our warehouse. We have 2 drones which does stock taking. Instead of a manual guy going with his reader, going to scan the barcodes, we have 2 drones which does that for us. And of course, we have autonomous forklifts going around. Just coming back, because I'm conscious about the time, just coming back to the connectivity and the Belt Road Initiative, which YCH is doing. We're very strong on the connectivity. The Laos Connect is something which is dear to our hearts. We're looking at using Laos as a connector between China and the ASEAN region. Laos currently is a landlocked country, as you may know. We're trying to make it from a landlocked to a land-linked country. And some of the technologies which we're looking to do within this dry port area is to have a container yard, a reefer, CFS, a bonded logistic warehouse. Basically, we have IoT devices which feed into the trucks, into the vehicles, and into the storage solutions so that we can track basically temperature, movements of the vehicles, driver analytics behavior, how we can optimize cross-border logistics. The other one that we're doing, we are creating a Belt Road Initiative Fund, a $150 million fund in partnership with Fortune International, a Chinese company, basically where we develop warehousing solutions for across several countries in Southeast Asia, including China. The last point, which is not here in the slides, we also are one of the shareholders for the Chongqing Connectivity Initiative, CCI. Chongqing Connectivity Initiative is the third G2G government project between China and Singapore, where we develop both technology solutions and also real estate and infrastructure solutions in Chongqing. It's a joint venture between YCH, PSA, PIL, and Carry Logistics, and together with 6 Chinese partners. Last slide, just want to do a bit of marketing, and that is our corporate venture arm, Supply Chain Angels, where CVC, we manage $20 million of money in partnership with NRF and also with SG Innovate. So that's a quick spin of YCH.
And can you now play the video, maybe, or?
It's okay, we will skip, yeah.
Thank you very much, James. By the way, if you're aware of the existence of an app called Slido, please feel free to use it to pose questions or comments. And I think it's going to be displayed by the number of likes or preferences by the audience. Yeah. Something like this. Okay. Thank you very much. And later, I'm going to open up the floor for questions, depending on the Slido results. Next, I'd like to invite Adrian to make a mini keynote. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Adrian. I'm a research director with Gartner Advisory. I'm based here in Singapore. And my job is very simple. I help to advise our clients on just 4 different things. I help them plan, I help them build, I help them launch, and I help them manage their technology products. So the area that I'm involved with, I cover the B2C mobile applications and digital commerce space. In the course of extending our research in this area, conversational AI has actually grown to be a very big part of that, and also a big part of the impetus that moves the industry moving forward. So I look forward to sharing a bit more with you later on. This is me. Thank you.
Hi. Sorry?
Next, I'd like to invite Louise. Yeah, please.
Now, what? What's this?
It's a slide.
Okay. So I'd actually, because I write for a newspaper, media, I don't really do something like these guys. It's helpful. So I had prepared to talk about innovation. Ken, do tell me if that's still appropriate, or you would like me to pass over, or?
Please go ahead.
We're really mixing it up today, so that's probably just fine, because it's a final one of the day, so that's okay. So we obviously have read an awful lot about the new Silk Road, the physical new Silk Road, which is the ports, the roads, the railways, and everything that's being built. But there's also the digital One Belt, One Road. And that's the one where the China tech giants and a load of startups as well are following on and bringing their own technology to bear along that route. So if you would imagine these long ago merchants, rather than trading silk and spices and tea, opting instead to take out their phones and paying with Alipay. Or imagine perhaps the diseases that did spread along that road. Instead of that happening, they were predicted well in advance and eradicated long before they claimed lives and sickness. You could still have a modern version of the transmission of culture that happened as well. Perhaps instead of philosophy and literature, you would have been having maths, language skills, now being taught on online tools. Now, there's no doubt, I think, that China is well placed to do this. We're seeing increasing amounts of innovation out of the country, and all those decades of calling it a copycat nation starting to look a little bit dated. That said, obviously, you can still get your knockoff DVDs and gadgets there. I guess one of the first examples, and I'm going to now see if I can actually use this, is in the third-party mobile payments market. As you can see from the chart, in China, it's just growing and growing, $16 trillion business, and absolutely dwarfing the amounts of third-party mobile payments that we have in other countries. Now, there's plenty, anyone, and I'm sure lots of you here go to China, and you'll see people just simply don't even carry wallets anymore because everything is done by phone. You're paying for your coffee, your taxi. You don't swap business cards either. You just scan WeChat. Although I must say, I've actually done that here at InnoVest as well. So that's one huge example. There's other innovations that have been surprisingly, perhaps, or perhaps not surprisingly, copied now by the US. Let's take bike sharing, something that had barely been thought of. Dockless bike sharing took off in China, immediately caught on like wildfire. As anyone will know, you'll see piles and piles of bikes everywhere you go. Maybe not all a good thing. Nonetheless, these bikes now not only have the Chinese players like Mobike and OFO taken their bikes to other markets, London, the US, Hong Kong, Singapore, I believe. But also, you've got startups doing similar in the US. Here is Limebike, which is a US startup doing what we'd been seeing in China a couple of years before that. New retail, again, a concept that a lot of us talk about here, had a moment when Amazon bought Whole Foods. But guess what? Alibaba had beat them to it, buying into physical stores long before. Alibaba now have stores where you can not only buy, have delivered, you can order, you can even, when it comes to food, order it, have it cooked to your the way that you like it there. There's more. We could obviously go on for ages on this. There's new startups. We're now seeing not just new retail, but gamified social retail with Pinduoduo. Facial recognition that lets you sort of put on dog mask and dance away to music on Toutiao. Lots of things. There are, of course, dangers lurking in all this as well. We've seen this in the West with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. There's plenty of data privacy concerns in China too. Also concerns about some of the less palatable exports we could see. So not just fast telecom networks, which are a boon, but also the export of things like internet sovereignty, which are less of a boon. But certainly the vast majority is about all the things that the Silk Road was originally about: progress, trading, and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. And finally, not the least, Zhang Gang. Yeah, you have a mic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Since we're talking about one belt, one road, I would like to make 2 disclaimers. First, I'm probably the only one among the panelists holding a Chinese passport, growing up in China, and came to Singapore in high school, but still keeping Chinese passport. And second, the company I'm running now, Momentum Works, we started with some personal funding from a co-founder of Alibaba. So just quite familiar with, since Luis brought upon this topic, quite familiar with what they are doing, and especially outside China. So what do? We build ventures in emerging markets. So I mean, I'm wearing batik because just now I was having a meeting with some investors from Indonesia. We also have a project which spans through the Islamic world. So, and in addition to building the ventures, we sometimes got approached by Chinese companies which try to get out of China because China is getting super competitive. And many people don't know where to invest in the domestic market because everywhere you go is red ocean. So lots of people are going out. We were approached by some of them to do some consulting for them. So as a result of that, last year I spent, don't know how much time in Dubai, especially during Ramadan, very productive. And also went to Iran for a few weeks last week. So it was interesting to see all this e-commerce, fintech, content, gaming, all these companies going overseas. And it's also interesting to see their assumption about the markets and the challenges they face. I think in detail it's probably different, but probably in a way similar to what Japanese companies were facing back in like 1970s, 1980s when they moved into international markets, or what some of the American tech companies were facing back in 1990s when they moved into China. So lots of disparity and lots of differences in culture, in understanding, but the way we see it is it's necessary pain when you actually grow into different markets, and we see interesting ways people actually overcome these challenges. Happy to share more.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's start discussion. Actually, I'd like to invite Adrian again to kind of present us a brief picture of what's going on in technology industry overall in this Belt and Road areas.
Just in quick summary as well, there are three big forces that are actually evolving over what the Chinese technology industry is doing. Number one, from the point of view of intellectual property, China has actually now taken the lead since 2016 in terms of the number of AI technology-related patents that they're pushing. So no longer, like what Luis has mentioned earlier on, are they seen as the copycats. They are now often the innovators in terms of AI-related technologies such as conversational AI, computer vision, robotics. And one thing that they're not well known for, and now they're slowly gaining strength, is actually data and analytics. So where we see the forces of technology pushing, it actually needs to feed three areas of business value. Chinese firms have always been about increasing their revenues. So AI is supposed to drive revenues. That's the top and always will be the most important aim. Number two is about cost optimization as well. Where can we save human labor? Where can we save repetitive tasks? This is where the AI technology is supposed to take over a lot of that. And finally, but not least, the third point that we want to emphasize on is that Chinese firms or Chinese technology firms are now actually pushing very heavily into the customer experience space. Now, in the Western world, everyone knows, hey, Amazon's fantastic, there's one-click buy, and the customer experience is supposed to be the best in class. But if you look at Chinese technology firms that are coming up here, the West is actually looking towards applications like WeChat, like Alipay, in order to learn what works, in order to create the most kind of friction-free purchase process. So customer experience is slowly becoming also a very important point with Chinese technology firms, and that is something that we cannot ignore, especially in the push towards this One Belt, One Road initiative.
Okay. Actually, so one key question I might ask is, so Chinese technology industry or technology people, are they looking at One Belt and One Road areas as their new business frontiers, probably where they can set the rules? Is that something going on?
Okay.
Yeah, in your observation, Adrian, yes, I'm asking.
Well, actually, I don't need to observe this. Gartner just completed an enterprise survey in China last year. Okay. We interviewed Chinese CIOs with regards to what was their biggest pressing concerns. And undoubtedly, the number one business objective for Chinese enterprises is actually about globalization and global expansion. So the One Belt, One Road initiative is something that the CIOs are acutely aware of, and they're actually trying to align their business activities in order to take advantage of the projects and the support and the investments that are coming up in this area.
Yes.
Maybe I'd just also like to interject. Why we see a lot of exactly what you're saying. Chinese companies looking to come out. Likewise, we as a homegrown Singapore company, we're looking to collaborate with the Chinese. At YCH, we formed a joint venture together with the Chongqing Transport Group, CTG, and that's to develop technology solutions for the transportation services in Chongqing. And looking at Chongqing is going to be connected down through Southeast Asia. And we're looking at providing technology solutions.
Can you
there.
give us some routes? I mean, in the way? I mean, Chongqing to
You'll go
Kunming to...
Yeah, Chongqing, Kunming down to Thailand, Vietnam, Thailand, potentially connecting up to Laos, which is where the Laos Connect came in just now through one of my slides. And we see a lot of cross-border transportation happening. Increasingly, you'll see the ASEAN single window, which is being pushed by the ASEAN member states. So far, we only have 5 member states being signed up. But once the rest of the member states signed up, the throughput from one truck being trucked down from one country to another makes it much easier. Instead of changing trucks from when you go from Vietnam to Thailand, you got to change trucks because the countries prevent you from using other countries' trucks. Yeah.
Okay. Luis just briefly mentioned, but when Chinese internet companies go overseas, perhaps democratic countries overseas, they might face problems they have never faced domestically in the country, like privacy, like freedom of speech, expression, protection of data, maybe. Is that already happening in the way they are going in the Belt and Road areas, do you think, Louise?
I guess, the main places where they've been stymied so far, obviously, are in the US, where they've been, stifled in, like when Alibaba's aunt, I beg your pardon, tried to buy MoneyGram. So certainly from sort of what they can buy, and again, that is about data. The Americans not wanting American citizens' data in their hands. I think so far where they've obviously concentrated, as James will know, is very much in this area, is in Southeast Asia, in India. And so far, I don't think they've come across much of an issue on those sort of issues yet. Although it is interesting that in China, actually, we are starting to see, small so far, but I think it was in Jiangsu province, some lawsuits taken against Baidu over data. And bit by bit, we're starting to see little bits. So certainly, even at home, they're now being challenged. I don't think it's any longer fair to say, but nobody cares about that. I think, actually, people are starting to.
And Adrian, so you did a research. Your company did a survey of CIOs in Chinese companies, right? That's right. And so their concerns include that kind of international institutional conflicts?
Most definitely. They're definitely aware in terms of the reputation and the brand's preference for where data resides. And actually, with the passing of the GDPR regulations now in May, Chinese companies have actually been actively and visibly compliant with the GDPR regulations. So that's a good positive move forward. I don't think it's too much of a negative view or perspective to take here as well. In respect to the Chinese tech companies that we've spoken to, I would dare say that a majority of them are very cognizant of the fact that you have to be able to play on a global stage. They don't look to design technology only for China. They design technology for consumers all over the world. It just happens to be made in China.
Does that word include the United States in many cases? Through your survey, what did you find?
Most definitely. But right now, the biggest Chinese technology firms are looking closer to home. So they're looking at South Asia, they're looking at Southeast Asia. In my own personal experience as well, there's been a lot of Chinese tech firms who ask us questions about which are the best Southeast Asian markets to approach, how do we best go about talking to the consumers, talking to businesses in order to set that up. So that pressure on globalization is pushing hard, and they're first looking at the countries closest to home.
Okay, and so those CIOs include definitely technology companies as well.
Most definitely.
And that plays into your business, James, I think. So it's creating a lot of business opportunities for you guys, like, supply chain management and logistics and physical things and so forth. But you said some of your warehouses are completely automated. No human being involved at all?
Not some. So we have one warehouse here in Singapore which is entirely automated. It sits on
zero human being.
Yeah. So unfortunately the video couldn't play, but basically it's a black box. You can call for a pallet. If you know what a pallet means, it's a wooden crate. You can call for the pallet within 3 to 5 minutes from any point in time. It's a 24/7 operations. So basically, we can keep anything from liquor down to cups, mugs, t-shirts, lubricants, drums. It's entirely automated, meaning it comes in from the conventional warehouse. Through a racking system, it goes into the storage solution. So everything is based on conveyor belts and cranes. Yeah.
And I guess, so you're spreading your business into basically entire Asian countries.
Yes.
I mean, across all the Asian countries. And I imagine in some countries, technology is more expensive than human being. I mean, to employ or manage your warehouses and logistics networks.
Yeah.
And which countries are you usually try to use human beings rather than technology? And which countries you're not?
Yeah, it's a good question. So actually, we look at two things. One, besides human beings, the other one is the land cost. Depending on how expensive land here, land in Singapore is really expensive, which makes it, I think there's someone from JTC here, sorry. So, but land here is expensive, but because it's expensive, we need to make it a bit more, work harder for us. So in this case, our automated warehouse sits on 100,000 square feet of land. Is equivalent to 600,000 square feet of warehouse. So that's one of the considerations, cost of land. The second one, of course, is labor. We don't bring this kind of automation into China. And the third reason is because of talent. We don't get enough people who are well-versed enough to operate such an advanced system. Yeah.
So you still need the human being to operate the automated system.
Yeah, you still need technical requirements. It's a human.
Can you do it remotely from Singapore?
Technically you can, but I don't think you want to, because when you want to troubleshoot issues, you need a person down there on the ground. Yeah.
What kind of talents are in shortage in China? To you, right?
To operate the automated storage retrieval system, it's very, very selective. So you don't see many of those talents there. That's the main one, why we don't do it, and also because of land costs. To us, on the real estate front, it's cheaper and more effective for us to build a single-story warehouse if the land is cheap, because then the land prices go up. It's an asset play. Yeah.
And when you go into less developed countries, like Myanmar or Laos, how is the infrastructure, especially digital infrastructure, play in developing your business?
Yeah, so in really developing countries, it's less so of a technology piece, largely because the environment there is not so well connected as Singapore or China or Malaysia or Indonesia, especially when it comes to Myanmar or Laos. Basically, they're coming off from a very low base. So whatever we introduce to them, even on a simple warehouse management, transport management solution, it's already a big up for them. And we don't want to introduce high technology because it doesn't make sense for them. They're not ready equipped for such a technology. Yeah.
So I imagine you have great expectations for development of Belt and Road Initiative, which might lead to some China, certain country cooperation that will lead to infrastructure investment even in digital sphere, and that will make your business easier.
Yeah, so basically, we look ourselves as looking at three things within the supply chain. We call it the supply chain, the logistics superhighway. So one is the physical movement, the physical movement of goods from point A to point B. This could be cross-border, within border. The second is the informational flow. So how do you deal with information of where the good is, when it's supposed to move, how it's supposed to move, what time it's supposed to move, how big is the good. The third flow is the financial flow. So if you can solve the financial piece, say if I'm moving a product from China to Thailand, as it moves along the road or by ship, can I finance this? Why not? What kind of data do I need to finance it? If it's already being financed, how can I make that data a bit more rich so that I can make the financing cheaper? So if you can combine the physical, the informational, and the financial flow, these three flows, I think it's a win-win for everyone. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Changkang. So your investment strategy currently, is it more focused on Chinese businesses expanding into Belt and Road areas, or are you trying to find a needle in a haystack in less developed frontier markets like Myanmar or Laos or even Pakistan or Iran?
I think we try to get a bit of both because over the last 20 years, what has developed in China is unprecedented. There's lots of technology expertise. There's lots of experience for the market. There's lots of expertise people have accumulated. So there's wealth of knowledge to tap on. But quite often for these guys to go to a new market, even Indonesia, where there's lots of ethnic Chinese, it's difficult for them because it requires local expertise. So for instance, we run a fintech company in Indonesia, and people in China are so used to QR code and are so used to people being able to pay with just one click or scanning of the face. And when they go there, they look at the challenges, they don't know what to do because it's something that they're so used to, and they can't imagine that a society without, I mean, people still have to go to the ATM to make a bank transfer. So that, and lots of that actually causes people to find it difficult. And also, the trust is also an issue because we speak to any Chinese businessman, one thing you probably see is kind of paranoia about competition. Like in China, in every sector, people are competing against each other. The local government is competing against the local government next door. The logistics business is competing with the logistics business in the same industrial park, etc., etc. So that is why, I mean, so many businesses are going out because they said, okay, I mean, I'm fed up with the competition. I'm looking for blue ocean somewhere else. And some others are saying that, oh, okay, because of a competition, I'm not market number one, but there's not much future growth opportunities in China. I need to go out. Just to give you an example, I mean, for those sellers selling on e-commerce on Taobao, for a long time, the customer acquisition cost is about 5 to 10 yuan, which works to be 1 to 2 Singapore dollars per customer. And if the customer buys something which gives you a margin higher than that, you're making a profit. But since 2015 to 2016, this has grown to 150 to 200. So for lots of businesses, you're not making money. That's why people are going outside. So, and I think there's a sweet spot to combine some of the expertise there and capital with local people who are good enough, who know the local market, and make it work. But it's challenging. So I mean, you're based in India, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Alibaba has been trying to enter India. Probably now is their 7th attempt through Paytm Mall.
Yeah.
So the previous 6 attempts all failed. And even after that, so many attempts, I mean, they look at the Indian markets to find someone who understands the local market, who can also speak Chinese and communicate with logistics, with marketing, with product team back in China. Less than 4 people, fewer than 4 people. So what Amazon, which is quite successful in India, to find people in India who understand local market, who speaks English, who's familiar with Amazon's culture, is super easy. So I would say that there will be quite a long learning curve, and we are finding opportunities where there's a sweet spot that I mean, everything's ready, and of course we also don't want to be there too early. So in 2015, some friends of mine went to Iran after the nuclear deal signed with the Obama administration. They went there and said, okay, so Iran is going to open up. In 2 years' time, it will be completely open up. And if we are here 2 years before that, we'll hit the jackpot. And nobody predicted Trump. And the situation now, and last week I checked, hey, where are you guys? One said, I'm in Turkey. One said, I'm in Tbilisi. I said, why aren't you guys in Iran? We're still having business in Iran. I said, we'll just wait. Time is not ready yet.
Okay. And actually, that leads to some observation I am making these days. You know, so U.S. got out of Iran nuclear deal. That makes Iran kind of a riskier country than several months ago for many people. But at the same time, India and China, they are improving their bilateral relationships dramatically for the past couple months. And just several days ago, Modi was here in Singapore and talked in the Shangri-La dialogue, and reiterated that he would improve the bilateral relationship between China and India. And that leads to, so India is very friendly with Iran and very deep economic relationship. And India, Iran, and Russia are trying to build a corridor, economic corridor called North-South Economic Corridor, which basically stretches from the southern shore of Iran to Central Asia, Caucasus countries, to former Russian republics, to Europe. And because Pakistan is an enemy country for India, they are expecting this route to go up north and to the west, to Europe. Great expectations for their exports. And because India is improving its relationship with China, it might connect itself to Belt and Road Initiative. So it's going to be from Beijing to India to Iran to Russia to Europe.
I think every country along the One Belt One routes are trying to hedge their base. I mean, they want to leverage the capital and expertise from China, but at the same time, they don't want to become too dependent on China. I was in Iran last year, and the feeling is very, very strong that, okay, they want to leverage what China has to offer, but they want to remain independent, so they're probably hedging their bets. But in some areas, it's difficult, right? I mean, so the hotel I was staying at, I think it was a huge hotel, and 60% of the occupants were Chinese, from China, and mostly from state-owned companies. And I even met a guy who is from the Chinese Academy of Sciences. I asked, what are you doing? He said, I can't tell you, but he's related to some military satellite positioning stuff. And he said the Iranians are very, very much wanting to develop their own system, but they don't have the technology. And they can't use GPS, which is owned by US military, and they don't trust the Russians. So they didn't have a choice, but if they have a choice, they will probably hedge their bet.
Well, what I was trying to describe is probably this time, if the US try to enforce its sanctions against Iran, it might not work because all the rest of the world is kind of united to maintain the peaceful regime surrounding Iran. So as an investor, how are you observing these developments? That's my question.
So anyone who has US dollar asset would probably stay away from Iran now. I mean, last year I know a few friends of mine were actively going to Iran to see if the market opens up with other opportunities, can we be there early? But everyone who has US dollar asset is now scared. So I don't want to have my dollars frozen, right? And there's only one bank called Kunlun Bank, which is owned by PetroChina, who is doing the cross-border settlement between Iran and China. They were sanctioned by the US government in 2013. And afterwards they said, screw it. I'm not going to touch any US dollar. I'm just going to do RMB and Rial. And they're not connected to any other bank in China. So for you to work with them, you have to wait for them to open a branch in your city in China, and you have to take cash out of the bank branch. So that, yeah.
Luis, anything to add in this development surrounding Iran? I mean, any observation related to maybe China will be the godfather of Iran and Iran supporters?
I completely agree on the point about the hedging the bets. We've already started to see, again, on the physical assets, some of the sort of what it means to take the Chinese dollar, Chinese renminbi, the port in Sri Lanka, other things, because I think there is this thing, particularly when financing comes attached. If you're a poorer country, it's like, great, build my roads, my ports, my railways, but then the cash flows don't quite make it up. Suddenly you're screwed, you can't pay for it, and you do a debt for equity swap, it's basically takeover by the back door. And I think some of the countries along the route are starting to see this. So I definitely think it's no longer red carpet out, here comes cash. It would be interesting, another year or so down the line to see if those occupancy rates are so heavily Chinese, I think.
In addition to financing, last month I was in Jakarta talking to two ex-ministers. They're going to build this high-speed railway between Jakarta and Bandung. And now within the government, there's this debate that whether they're going to force the Chinese to do technology transfer or not. If they do, and they look around, they said that Indonesia doesn't have any railway college. They don't have the engineers to be able to take this knowledge. But and it probably doesn't make sense because they're not going to build 50,000 kilometers of railways for this to make sense. But if they don't, if they build this railway completely on Chinese technology, they're going to become dependent on China for the expertise, for the technology, for everything. Its infrastructure is huge. I'm not sure how much that went into the Malaysian government's decision recently, but
Today, yes. I think actually just on that, I mean, Africa is another example of where we've just seen this massive, everywhere you go now, it's all Chinese characters on roads and stuff. So I think, there is just this sense of not wanting to be too much in hock. And Malaysia's clearly a kind of an illustration.
Yes, and there was a big debate about Chinese debt trap, or intentional or unintentional, but countries like Sri Lanka or Nepal or even Myanmar are thinking about danger of becoming too much dependent on Chinese money. And some of the contributors to my publication, Nikkei Asian Review, specifically Dr. Chelony, he keeps saying this is a trap. And so those small countries, financially fragile countries, should be more cautious about taking Chinese money. Otherwise, their ports will be taken by Chinese, and they're going to use it as a military base. And that's an argument we often hear. But do you agree that kind of cautiousness, or as an investor, do you still do you take into those kind of risks into your investment?
We do the digital stuff, so that means we're not going to spend so much money laying out the infrastructure, I mean building roads, railways, and stuff. So in that regard, we are sort of less risky in a way. And I think as far as tech is concerned, for many markets, for the foreseeable years to come, it's still more about telling a story rather than reaping the actual benefits. So in that regard, as far as tech investment is concerned, I think risk is not that high compared to people having to take a loan to build a railway, to build a port or whatever. So for that we sort of more look at the demographics to see whether this country is at the right time. The infrastructure is there. People have access to mobile internet, and the logistics infrastructure is there. So for e-commerce and other stuff to do, I mean, it's risky, but it's not risky to a certain extent that if the business you invest in goes bankrupt, you still have to pay a lot of debt.
I guess one exception might be telecoms, because there it's hardware and the digital side, right?
Yeah, and Adrian, do you see any those Chinese technology companies? Are they risking in or factoring in those political risks? I mean, at one point, those countries might turn very hostile against Chinese investments or Chinese cooperation. And do you observe that, or?
In speaking to Chinese technology firms, they're definitely aware of what the geopolitical situation is. One thing that I kind of want to emphasize is in talking to Chinese technology firms, the one big point that stands out is that these co-founders, CEOs, and CTOs are actually incredibly long-term minded. So they're not playing a short game here. They're not here to make quick bucks and get out. They are here to understand that understanding any given target market, learning their preferences, learning their wants, crafting the correct customer experience is actually the secret to a business with longevity. So they're not playing a short game, and one thing that I can always say is that the confidence level that I get from Chinese tech firms is incredibly high. In speaking to our Southeast Asian technology firms, I do sense a bit of hesitance as well. I'm sorry I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but in speaking to Southeast Asian technology firms, there is almost a sense of hesitation as in, hey, can we beat the West? Can we beat Chinese technology? The short answer is yes. Yes, we can. And how we do this is actually just by great customer insights or great consumer understanding that we can provide. Like Qian Kang said, in Indonesia, there are certain cultural nuances that have to be delivered, be it from a logistics service or consumer tech service. And this is an area where local technology firms have a huge part to play. So there's definitely business potential there.
Okay. We have 15 minutes, or it says 8 minutes, but I guess, yeah. I'm going to pick up some of the questions from the audience here. So number one popular question, is there anything Southeast Asia can offer China as a provider rather than as a consumer market to tap on? Ho, what do you think? Yeah, please. Yes. Yes.
Well, don't forget Southeast Asia has 600 million people, so don't discount the fact that we are also a large base for the Chinese companies to come out into Southeast Asia. They don't just look at China itself. Increasingly, you've been hearing that the Chinese companies have been looking out. Number two is there's certain talents that we have that the Chinese don't have. Especially, I think last month I asked one of the ambassadors to China, previous ambassadors to China, why do the Chinese still want to talk to Singaporeans, right? They already have the market, they already have the technology. The difference that we bring to the table is that we are able to bring processes and deeper insights to the Southeast Asian market, which the Chinese at this point don't have. I won't say that they will not never have. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of, at this point, how we as a country in Singapore, in Southeast Asia, are able to tap onto this as a differentiator. So coming back to the question, yes, I think we do offer more than just Singapore, Southeast Asia being a consumer market. The other thing is that you see a lot of production which is used to be manufactured in China has gotten more expensive, and see some of the production being happened in Vietnam and Thailand and some of the other countries. So that's also another market that we look at.
Xiang Kang, what do you think? You can introduce some bright hope startup you are hiding in your portfolio here.
I think, so coming back to my discussion with the ex-ministers in Jakarta, so a week before I visited them, they had dinner with the Chinese premier, who was actually in Jakarta, and one thing they discussed, which all of them had lots of hope for, is Indonesia is a Muslim country. Whatever it produces to sell into the 55 other Muslim countries, that carries credibility. Alibaba has been trying to sell things, halal certified things, whatever, but the people generally don't believe. People don't even know whether the gelatin you sell is real gelatin, let alone is whether it's pork gelatin or chicken gelatin. So there's lots of credibility, but in China there's lots of manufacturing expertise which can be exported to Indonesia, and allowing Indonesian businesses to tap into other opportunities along the One Belt One Road. Because I think about the belt is largely Muslim countries. And just very simple thing, right? I mean, if you look at Indonesia now has a very fierce fisheries minister, but if you look at their whole supply chain of seafood products, there's lots of efficiencies. So many fishermen use like a domestic grade, home grade freezers, not industrial grade. So what's the difference? Home grade freezes the things in like 5 to 6 hours, and the industrial grade, does that like in an hour or so. So the quality obviously is different. And so I think there's lots of expertise which can be exported. And another thing which I think can be quite interesting is the Malaysian Chinese who speak Chinese. And so far for the business that we are running in Jakarta, the best people we hired, apart from some good locals, but we had some really, really good Malaysians who speak Indonesian, because it's a very similar language, who also speak Chinese. They can deal with the tech and experts in China. They can also work in the local market. The only challenge is that many of them are too cynical. I don't know why.
Okay. Second popular question. Will Chinese commercial dominance destroy other nations' sovereignty and national identity? Wow. I'm curious what you think, each of you. Maybe starting from James, maybe?
Well, I won't say, destroy other nations' sovereignty and national identity. It's up to the nation itself to defend and push back. Exactly what Singapore did, during the Terex incident last year or the year before. It's a matter for each individual government to push back. Of course, we do see the Chinese government pushing forward in terms of commercial interests, right down to the ports, to mining materials. I think the governments needs to be very wary of such acquisitions and investments by the Chinese. But of course, this has been happening even back then when the US was going around, when the United Kingdom was going around to acquire and invest in companies back then. So I mean, you do see traditions of such things happening. So it's inevitable, I think. It's just a matter for each individual country to defend its own rights. Yeah.
Thank you. Adrian, what do you think?
Short answer, no. I think I can speak only for the technology firms that I've met so far. So the Chinese tech companies that I've met so far are aiming for two things. They're looking for macro stability. If the market conditions are not stable, it's really hard to expand and increase their business. But what they're also looking for is the micro volatilities, the big pockets of, the small pockets of market niches and gaps that they can cover. So it does them no long-term good to actually try to dominate or overwhelm a nation's sovereignty in that case. So this will be the thing that I would say from their side. Macro stability, micro volatility. That's what they're looking for.
Okay, Louise.
I'd say the important thing is that when these big companies go, and Southeast Asia again is a good example, they don't just go in, partly because they can't, they partner with somebody. So you still have Paytm, which is very Indian company. You still have Kakao, very South Korean. The question is, I guess, that once they reach a certain level, then they do become 100%. And I guess we'll see the first example in Singapore, maybe with Lazada, how that looks in a year's time, once it's wholly Alibaba. So, I mean, I do think it's a risk. But again, I mean, I agree with James. It'll be up to them to kind of fight back and make sure they keep their flavor.
Changkan. You're Chinese.
I'm Chinese, yeah.
In a batik shirt.
In a batik shirt, yes. Sovereignty, probably not. But I think that also depends on Trump for the next few years to see, because I think the international order has to be maintained by a balance of certain powers. National identity, I think these are two different things. National identity is something which is evolving, so it's hard to say, right? I mean, so of course there will be some Chinese tech influence, there's some infrastructure influence. I mean, whether that help people become more nationalistic or more pro-China, I think really depends. So this is an evolving topic. But I would say at the end of the day, it's difficult for tech companies to actually impact other countries' sovereignty. But one thing we do see is last year around this time, I was actually in Shanghai. I was actually chairing a small meeting between the state information office and some of the foreign companies. There was lots of issues discussed about data sovereignty. I think this is something that country governments are going to take lots of time and effort to study on. So on that note, I don't think Ant Financial can dominate the payments in Southeast Asia.
Well, actually, digital technology is better without borders. I mean, for users in general. And I think, especially in the region like Southeast Asia, where each country is relatively small except Indonesia, probably technology companies or technology developers or entrepreneurs are wishing there is less sovereignty in each member of the ASEAN, and that ASEAN economic community will grow into a true common market. So, and in that, if that happens, I think there will be a chance that Singapore will be too dominant as a hub of innovation, because their talent, their money, society is more developed than others in terms of infrastructure and everything, and regulatory frameworks, government transparency, less corruption, ease of doing business in general. Wouldn't that emerge as a new threat of too much dominance? What do you think? That's the last question. I start from you, James. Yes.
No, I think each will have their own part to play. Singapore is, of course, like what you said, we are very well known for efficiency, processes laid out. But of course, if Indonesia decides to close its doors, I mean, what are we going to do? We have 5.9 million people. what app are you going to do for that? I mean, we need a global market. We need a Southeast Asian market to tap on. So short answer, no.
Okay. What do you think, Adrian?
From my point of view, Singapore becoming a technological force to reckon with, I think we have built a good reputation for ourselves. I often get asked questions about what Singapore Smart Nation Office is doing, what Singapore is trying to push in terms of building up a smart city infrastructure. And I think there are very encouraging examples that we can always give. Now, whether it will be a commercial impact to somebody like China, definitely not. I think even now, markets like the US or US tech firms are now grappling with the fact that the real threat is now coming from the East. So China forms 3 out of the big AI 7 companies, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Google being the Western ones. Then you have Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. So what do you do with that? How do you balance that? So that's actually the situation I'll pay a lot more closer attention to.
Okay, Louise, what do you think?
I think Singapore is a great lab. It's small, so when you were having, for example, broadband, you could just sort of wire it up very quickly. It's dense, it's small, it's great. The trouble now is that China's got 1 million Singapores in it, with a lot more people, a lot more use cases. So while it's great for Singapore to organize the traffic, you're going to save much more time in China. I think someone was telling me that ambulances, by directing the flow of traffic with the smart city or the smart brain, they halve the time it takes an ambulance to get through. You simply won't need that ever in a Singapore or in anywhere in the US bar New York. And they can, I forget, you will remind me, the new city that's just been created, which is going to be an entire AI city, Chongqing. Yeah, exactly. So you can just create whole new corridors, cities, and do it. So, yeah, I think Singapore did have that great role, but I think it may be trumped now. Trumped, yeah.
Okay, last comment from Changkang.
About 6 weeks ago, I had a dinner with one of the contenders for the next PM in Singapore, together with 7 Chinese billionaires. I think the minister and I together dragged down the average net worth by $0.2 billion on that table. But anyway, so I think at the political level, I mean, Singapore is very, very careful about playing this balancing game between the different powers, understanding what is coming up, and one thing which was emphasized again and again by the minister is that Singapore can never play a size game. And so there are many attempts to attract talent or whatever, but at the end of the day, I mean, 5 million people, you can't grow that to 20 million. So there are other areas that Singapore specializes in, and I think so far it's been doing well, and I think I have reasonable confidence that we will do well for the next decades.
We meaning Singaporeans.
Huh?
We meaning Singaporeans.
Sorry?
Or Chinese.
He's an honorary one.
Among the 7 billionaires from China on that table, 5 are applying for Singapore citizenship. So I think that says a lot. And also another anecdote, for a Singapore citizen to get work permit in Indonesia, it takes about 15% of the time that it takes to process an application for a Chinese citizen. So I think that says a lot about how neighboring countries are perceiving Singapore. So.
Okay, great. I think we are running out of time, and this concludes our session about Digital and Belt and Road Initiative. Thank you for listening, and thank you for coming. Good day.